6th, white supremacist QAnon insurrection in Washington. Well, it was bad, but it keeps getting worse. Just on Friday, CNN informed us that that day was actually worse than 9/11 and Pearl Harbor.
Good evening. 150 days since the worst single act of political violence since the Civil War, and the man who incited it is crying about being kept off social media.
The worst single act of violence since the Civil War. Anyone read anymore? Sandy Cortez can't read, but she can feel. She feels deeply. She's very easily traumatized. She was nowhere near the white supremacist QAnon insurrection when it happened, but to this day, she's got PTSD from it.
You have this transition period of escalating violence, which really culminated on the 6th, for which, was an extraordinarily traumatizing event that's not really being discussed. It's politically sensitive. No one wants to say, oh, boo-hoo. But there are members of Congress that served in war.
So you're doing therapy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm doing therapy, but also I've just slowed down. I think the Trump administration had a lot of us, especially Latino communities, in a very reactive mode.
Imagine being that girl's therapist. I mean, you're paid to listen to people talk about themselves. Your job is to absorb narcissism. That's how you make a living. But at some point, you got to say, please stop talking about yourself. Please stop complaining just for a second. They tell us we need to get to the bottom of what happened during the white supremacist QAnon insurrection of January 6th. But what's so interesting about it is that the government, despite calling for openness, has still not released thousands of hours of surveillance video from that day. Interesting. So if it was the worst day of political violence since the Civil War, says the historically illiterate CNN anchor, why won't they show us the pictures? Julie Kelly is one of the very few journalists who's looked into this. Here's some of the video that she obtained from January 6th.
The police here are willing to work with us and cooperate peacefully, like our First Amendment allows. Gather more Americans under the condition that they will come and gather peacefully to discuss what needs to be done to save our country. Everybody, this must be peaceful.
This has to be peaceful. We have the right to peacefully assemble.
Poor Sandy Cortez probably speed dialing her therapist right now. The Senate has released its report on that day. Julie Kelly has read it. She's with American Greatness. We're happy to have her join us tonight to tell us what's in it. Julie Kelly, thanks so much for coming on. What's in this report?
Well, it's interesting, Tucker, because it basically really blames the U.S. Capitol Police, who we are told were heroes similar to the heroes who stormed the beach in Normandy and, all other terrorist attacks, the people who were there helping that day. But it turns out that U.S. Capitol Police were not prepared, did not have a plan, ignored warnings that there could be violence that day. But obviously, the story now is that the U.S. Capitol Police officers, so many are also so traumatized, just like AOC, that they want $4.4 million to open up a wellness and trauma center to help work through all their feelings about what happened that day.
Are you being serious? I wonder, can a country where federal employees are this silly, can it kind of continue? I mean, for real. Okay. So right. the Capitol Police, we know that the one gunshot fired that day was from a Capitol policeman who killed an unarmed protester. Now, we kind of instinctively take the side of the police in these things, all things being equal, but we still don't know why, because we've never seen the report, and we don't know who, we don't know the name of the cop who did that. Are we ever going to find that out?
I don't know. I think her family is trying to find out. I'm not really sure why we don't have more Republican officials, Republican leaders in Washington demanding to know the name, the identity of that officer, demanding to see the investigation we were told was performed, conducted, and closed about what happened to Ashley Babbitt. But look, the U.S. Capitol Police, really, they are the ones you were just referring to, the 14,000 hours of surveillance video they have just from noon to 8 o'clock on January 6th. They will not release that footage. They don't even want defendants to see it. They don't want defense attorneys to see that footage, because I think we'll see more of what you just showed, Tucker, that clip about how so many protesters were let in. They were talking to Capitol Police officers. We know they were taking selfies. So for the insurrection, QAnon, white supremacist, domestic violent extremist, worst thing since Civil War happened, either the cops are complicit in it, or what can you say about them? Apparently so many are traumatized too by the selfie takers that we need to open a trauma and wellness center to help them out.
I don't understand how you can prosecute someone for a crime and then withhold potentially exculpatory video. That seems
that's what they're
completely
doing.
Contrary to justice. Well, that's just shocking, and maybe a Republican office holder can wake up and note that, like now. Julie Kelly, I appreciate your reporting on this.